Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the very reason you've been overlooked, undervalued, or misunderstood by men isn't because you're not enough, but because you've never been shown how powerful you truly are? Imagine this. The moment you stop chasing love and start radiating the kind of energy that commands it, everything changes. Yes, even he changes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this another one of those just be yourself pep talks? Nope. This is about activating something deeper, something primal, magnetic, undeniable. Because when you tap into this one shift, no, not a trick, not a game, but a transformation, men won't just want to be with you, they'll fight to keep you. And the best part, you won't have to sacrifice your worth to get it. So buckle up, because in the next few minutes, we're going to shatter some myths, laugh a little, possibly cry. Hey, no judgment, and unlock a truth so potent it might just make him drop to one knee before he even knows what hit him. What if the reason your love life feels like a loop of short lived sparks, confusion, and unmet expectations isn't because men are afraid of commitment or because you're not trying hard enough, but because you haven't fully stepped into the raw, magnetic power of your own confidence and self worth? I'm not talking about the surface level kind of confidence, the one where you say the right things, smile at the right time, post that perfect picture with the perfect filter. I'm talking about the kind of inner radiance that doesn't whisper, I hope I'm enough, but declares, without apology, I know exactly who I am. The kind that shifts energy when you walk into a room. The kind that turns heads not because of how you look, but because of how deeply you know your value. Now, let's pause for a moment. Be honest. Have you ever found yourself shrinking just a little to make someone else more comfortable? Maybe you second guessed your needs, laughed at something that didn't feel right, or stayed silent when your soul was screaming. We've all been there. It's the fear of being too much, or worse, not enough, that trains us to dim the very light that would have drawn in the right person in the first place. And here's the truth no one tells you. The moment you abandon yourself for love, you send the message that love requires your disappearance. But what if love, true, lasting, spine tingling love, actually starts when you show up in full force? That's the shift we're talking about. Because radiating confidence and self worth isn't a vibe you put on, it's an identity you embody. It's the way you hold eye contact and let silence stretch without rushing to fill it. It's how you can say no without guilt and yes without fear. It's not about arrogance, it's about anchored certainty. It's about knowing that your presence is not a favor to the world, it's a gift. And the more you believe that, the more the world, and yes, men, will begin to respond to you differently. Quick question. Why is it that when a man says, I know what I want, it's admired? But when a woman says the same, she's intimidating. Let's laugh at the double standard for a second and then crush it completely. Because the reality is, when you radiate confidence, you no longer wait to be chosen. You choose. You don't beg for time, for clarity, for affection. You expect it because your standards are no longer rooted in scarcity. And here's where it gets really exciting. Once you shift from performing for love to attracting it, the chase ends. Not because you've given up, but because you've leveled up. But this transformation isn't always gentle. There's a part of it that's going to sting. The part where you start setting boundaries and people who once benefited from your silence start falling away. The part where being alone for a moment feels scarier than staying in something half-hearted. And then there's that terrifying realization that some relationships were never rooted in love, but in your fear of not being loved. These moments can break you open, and yet they are the very doorway to becoming unbreakable. Because each time you choose yourself, you reinforce a truth that echoes louder than rejection ever could. I am worthy. Let's go even deeper. Confidence isn't just about how you feel, it's about what you tolerate. If you've ever made excuses for bad behavior, if you've ever tried to fix someone instead of choosing someone who's already whole, you've been negotiating with your own value. And I get it. We're taught that being chosen is a prize. But what if the real prize is discovering that you were the prize all along, and you don't have to audition for your own worthiness? Here's a pattern interrupt for you. Ever notice how a cat walks into a room like it owns the place and suddenly it does? That's the kind of unapologetic energy we're tapping into. The quiet confidence, the unbothered self trust. The cat doesn't need your approval, it assumes it. Now, I'm not saying start licking your paw in public, but I am saying that when you embody that same silent power, you don't have to convince anyone to value you. They'll feel it in your presence. And those who don't, they'll walk. Let them. But here's the part most people skip over: self worth isn't a mood, it's a muscle. It's built in the daily decisions no one sees. It's built when you leave the situations that don't serve you. It's built when you speak truth, even when your voice trembles. It's built when you stop chasing potential and start living in your own. Every time you choose integrity over people pleasing, you are telling the world, this is who I am. Take it or watch me walk. That's power. And there's urgency here because the longer you delay owning your worth, the longer you attract people who benefit from your confusion. Every moment you spend in a relationship that makes you question your value is a moment stolen from the one that will reflect it. Time doesn't wait, and neither should your evolution. This is about reclaiming the years you were quiet, the tears you hid, the instincts you ignored. It's about turning your pain into presence and your presence into power. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once you radiate that deep, authentic self worth, something almost mystical starts to happen. People feel it before you speak. You become the standard. You shift the energy without trying, and suddenly, what once felt like effort, being seen, being desired, being respected, becomes effortless. You stop chasing, you start receiving, and then they told you to be softer, quieter, more accommodating, to not ask for too much, to not feel too deeply, to not want too loudly. And somewhere along the way, you began to confuse shrinking with being feminine. But what if I told you that your softness is not weakness and your nurturing spirit was never meant to be poured endlessly into empty cups? What if true feminine energy isn't about being passive or agreeable, but about being powerful in the most magnetic, untamed way possible, graceful yet grounded, open yet protected, radiant yet discerning? Because when you embody this energy paired with strong, healthy boundaries, you don't just attract attention, you command devotion. Let's get honest. How many times have you given too much too soon, hoping love would recognize your worth if you just loved a little harder? Maybe you stayed silent when something hurt, thinking patience would fix it. Maybe you felt that setting boundaries meant risking the connection, so you tolerated behavior that chipped away at your spirit one compromise at a time. But let's get one thing clear: feminine energy does not mean self abandonment. It's not about sacrificing your needs for peace. It's about honoring your truth so deeply that you refuse to participate in dynamics that dishonor it. Now, here's a funny thing: people often talk about divine feminine energy like it's a candlelit yoga session and moon water. And hey, no judgment if that's your thing. But let's talk about the real world version. Feminine energy is flow, it's intuition, it's creativity, it's emotional depth and spiritual clarity. But it's also fierce discernment. It's knowing when to surrender and when to step back. It's the wisdom to receive without chasing and the power to walk away without begging. And when you pair that with clear boundaries, something transformational happens. You stop attracting chaos and start calling in alignment. Let me give you a pattern interrupt. Ever tried pouring water into a bucket with no bottom? No matter how much you give, it never fills up. That's what loving without boundaries feels like: exhausting, unfulfilling, draining. Because when your love isn't protected by standards, it becomes a resource for others to exploit, not a force for connection. Healthy boundaries are the structure that allows your feminine energy to thrive. Without them, you're not a goddess, you're a giver, constantly bleeding energy for people who aren't qualified to receive it. This is where the fear creeps in. Because boundaries feel like walls, right? What if setting them pushes people away? What if you're too much? What if they leave? But here's the truth you must tattoo on your soul: Anyone who leaves because you set a boundary was never really there for you. They were there for what you allowed. Your boundaries don't repel love, they reveal it. They filter out the ones who seek to drain you and create space for the ones who are ready to rise with you. And that's not just empowering, it's urgent. Let's shift into the exciting part. When you fully embody feminine energy with healthy boundaries, you become the storm and the calm. You lead with your heart but guard your peace. You don't demand attention, you attract it through your presence. You don't over explain. You speak once with clarity and let your silence do the rest. You create safety not just for others but for yourself. And this safety is magnetic because the world is starving for women who can be both soft and strong, loving and sovereign, nurturing and unshakably self honoring. Think about this. A river flows with beauty and grace, but it still has banks. Without them, it becomes a flood, chaotic, dangerous, directionless. Your feminine energy is that river. Your boundaries are the banks. Together, they create a force that nourishes life while remaining in control of its power. This balance doesn't just attract people, it awakens something in them. It invites them to step up, to meet you at your level, to grow with you instead of taking from you. Now, here's a little truth bomb. Boundaries don't need to be aggressive to be firm. You don't need to scream, argue, or defend. Your tone can be soft and your no can still be final. That's the secret most people miss. True feminine power whispers and the world still listens. You don't have to justify your standards. You only have to know them. The moment you stop over explaining, you start commanding respect. The moment you stop tolerating the bare minimum, you start receiving the extraordinary. Let's take this even deeper. Feminine energy is emotional intelligence. It senses red flags before logic catches up. But when you've been conditioned to override your intuition, to second guess, to tolerate, to wait and hope, you disconnect from your own inner compass. Boundaries are how you reconnect. They're how you say to your soul, I hear you, and I will protect you. Every time you say no to something misaligned, you're saying yes to something sacred. That's how you begin to attract what feels like fate, not frustration. You might be wondering, how do I embody this in real life? It starts in the small moments. It's when you don't respond to the 2 a.m. text. It's when you say, I don't feel respected when you cancel last minute and let the silence speak louder than a lecture. It's when you choose to stay home rather than go somewhere that drains your energy. These acts may seem small, but they build the foundation of your entire vibration. And that vibration doesn't lie. It draws in what mirrors it back. Here's where urgency kicks in. The longer you delay living in your full feminine power, the longer you stay in patterns that steal your joy. Time doesn't make misalignment more aligned. Time only deepens the groove, and you weren't born to live a half-hearted life. You were born to be a force, soft like honey, sharp like truth. There is no medal for self-neglect. There is no reward for being the one who never speaks up. And there is no deeper heartbreak than the one that comes from betraying yourself in the name of being enough for someone else. But something wild begins to happen when you realign. You no longer fear losing people because you trust that what's meant for you doesn't require self-abandonment. You stop bending and start blooming. You stop performing and start receiving. And then there's a moment in every relationship where the desire to support another collides with the fear of losing yourself. Maybe it starts subtly. You skip that meeting to take a call. You shift your goals slightly to accommodate theirs. You compromise on timing, on energy, on space. And before you know it, the life you were building gets rearranged around someone else's dreams. But what if the true power of love isn't about sacrificing your vision for someone else's, but learning to hold theirs with grace while fiercely protecting your own? Because the greatest relationships aren't born from self-abandonment. They thrive on mutual expansion. Let's break a myth wide open. Supporting a partner doesn't mean dimming your light so theirs can shine brighter. That's not love, that's codependence in disguise. And yet, so many have been taught that to be a good partner means to be endlessly available, endlessly flexible, endlessly willing to let your desires take a back seat. But let's flip that narrative. What if the strongest support you can give is rooted in showing up as your fullest self, ambitious, aligned, on fire with purpose? What if your ability to cheer someone on is multiplied when you are already running your own race? Pause for a second. Let's laugh at the old belief that says love is about becoming one mind, one goal, one direction. Sounds poetic, right? Until you realize that kind of merging often leaves one person invisible. Love isn't about becoming one. It's about two whole people walking side by side, eyes on their own visions, hands held in mutual respect. You weren't born to orbit someone else's world. You came here to build a universe of your own, and real love, it doesn't compete with that. It complements it. Now let's talk about the fear that sneaks in, the fear that if you chase your goals too hard, you'll intimidate, that your ambition makes you too much, that your independence signals disinterest. But here's the truth: shrinking yourself to keep someone comfortable is the fastest way to lose both the relationship and yourself. Because every time you deny your desires, every time you suppress your calling to make space for someone else's, you send a message to your own soul: your dreams are optional, and they're not. There's a unique power that emerges when you hold space for someone else's vision without sacrificing your own. It's the power of dual leadership. You become a mirror and a muse. You challenge and inspire. You listen with intention and speak with clarity. You aren't afraid of their rise because you're climbing too. And here's where it gets exciting. When two people are both aligned with their purpose, the relationship becomes a launch pad, not a landing zone. You stop being the support system instead of having one, and you become two forces supporting each other. Pattern interrupt. Have you ever seen someone so focused on cheering from the sidelines that they forgot they were supposed to be in the game? That's what too many women are doing in relationships. Cheering, applauding, coaching, healing, guiding. Meanwhile, their own dreams gather dust. And yes, being a supporter is beautiful, but when you start neglecting your own goals to pour into someone else's, resentment builds. Quietly at first, then louder, because love that costs your purpose is too expensive to sustain. Let's zoom in even closer. Supporting someone's vision means asking the hard questions. What do they want? Where are they going? How can you contribute? Not by losing yourself, but by standing beside them with your own purpose intact. And then it means asking yourself the same. What am I building? What do I need to feel fulfilled? How do I honor my vision in the process? These questions aren't selfish. They're sacred. They create a foundation where love can grow without suffocating your spirit. There's a powerful shift that happens when you start prioritizing your own goals, not in opposition to love, but as a foundation for it. You stop settling for dynamics where you have to ask permission to shine. You stop needing validation for your dreams. You stop tolerating relationships that expect you to sacrifice your growth for someone else's comfort. And the more you own your path, the more you attract people who respect your path, not fear it, not control it, not resent it, respect it. Now let's talk urgency. Every day you put your vision on pause for the sake of being supportive, you're reinforcing the lie that your dreams can wait. They can't. Time doesn't rewind, purpose doesn't sleep. And love that asks you to betray your calling isn't love. It's a lesson. You weren't put here to be someone's emotional caretaker while your own legacy goes unwritten. Your voice, your art, your business, your calling, it matters. It was placed in you for a reason. And the longer you postpone it, the louder the emptiness will become. But here's where the transformation begins. When you start showing up for your life with discipline, with passion, with vision, you begin to lead with a different energy. You stop trying to be enough for anyone else because you're already full. You stop fearing that your success will push people away because the right ones won't be threatened, they'll be inspired. And suddenly, love doesn't feel like a balancing act, it feels like momentum. This is the kind of partnership that becomes electric, where two people are running toward their purpose, occasionally stopping to cheer each other on, but never asking the other to slow down. There is magic in being witnessed in your growth, in having someone say, I see you and I'll meet you there. But that only happens when you show up first, when you decide that your vision is not a burden, not a hobby, not a background song, but a battle cry. There's a silent hunger that lives deep within every man, not for praise, not for attention, but for something far more sacred, to be respected, to be seen as capable, as strong, as worthy, and not just in the world, but in the eyes of the one who matters most. Because when a man feels deeply respected and valued by the woman in his life, something powerful awakens inside him. He rises, he leads, he protects, he softens in the right places, and strengthens in others. Respect is not just a gift, it's fuel. And without it, even the strongest man begins to shrink. But with it, he becomes unstoppable. Let's flip the script. So often we're told to show love through affection, through care, through presence. But here's the truth: love without respect feels empty. It's like feeding someone a banquet with no flavor. Respect isn't a formality, it's emotional oxygen. And yet we live in a world that often mocks masculinity, that questions men's worthiness, that tells women to take control and tells men to sit down and be quiet. But deep connection isn't built on control, it's built on reverence. And when you learn how to communicate that reverence, not just in words, but in energy, in body language, in tone, you unlock a dimension of relationship most people never get to experience. Let's interrupt this for a second with a question. When's the last time you genuinely looked at someone and thought, I admire who you are when no one's watching? Because that's where true respect lives. Not in flattery, not in ego stroking, but in the quiet recognition of who someone is at their core. Respect is in the pause before criticism. It's in the way you speak about someone behind their back. It's in the willingness to believe the best about their intentions, even when they fall short. And that kind of respect, it's rare, which is why it's irresistible. Now let's talk about the fear, the unspoken fear that respecting someone deeply means giving up your power. That if you elevate another, you somehow lower yourself. That if you admire, you lose leverage. But that's not respect. That's manipulation dressed in fear. True respect isn't weakness, it's strength. It says, I see your greatness and I'm not threatened by it. It's the kind of confidence that doesn't need to dominate because it knows its own value. And when that kind of woman walks into a room fully in her power, yet fully capable of honoring someone else's, the room shifts. People feel it. And men especially recognize it as something they've been quietly craving all along. Respect starts in the smallest of moments. It's how you listen when he speaks. It's whether your eyes stay on your phone or meet his with presence. It's whether your tone uplifts or cuts, whether you challenge him from love or from superiority. And here's a little truth bomb. Men don't want perfection. They want partnership. They don't need you to agree with everything, but they do need to feel like their voice matters, like their efforts are seen, like their presence is appreciated, not tolerated. It's not about inflating egos, it's about seeing humanity. Have you ever seen someone shut down emotionally, not because they weren't loved, but because they felt constantly judged? That's what happens when respect is missing. He may still show up physically, go through the motions, keep the peace, but internally, he retreats. Emotional intimacy dies not from lack of love, but from lack of honor. And once that disconnect takes root, rebuilding trust becomes an uphill climb. That's why this matters. That's why the urgency to shift is real. Because every moment spent undermining his worth chips away at the very connection you're trying to build. But when you start to lead with respect, the game changes. Conversations become deeper. Vulnerability flows more freely. You stop fighting to be right and start focusing on being real. You create a space where he feels safe to be imperfect, to be honest, to be in process. And in that safety, he becomes more of who he truly is. Not because you fixed him, but because you saw him. There's nothing more magnetic than a woman who knows her own worth and can still reflect a man's back to him without conditions. Here's a quick reset. Let's not confuse obedience with respect. This isn't about becoming a yes woman or ignoring your needs to boost someone else's self-esteem. Quite the opposite. This is about authenticity, about telling the truth with grace, about holding standards while holding space. Respect without boundaries is performance, but respect with clarity, that's alchemy. It transforms everything it touches. Watch how he responds when you acknowledge his effort, not just the results, but the trying. Watch how his eyes light up when you notice something he thought went unseen. How his confidence grows when he knows he doesn't have to prove himself to you over and over again. He can exhale, he can lead from a place of peace instead of pressure. And in return, he starts seeing you more clearly too, because admiration invites admiration, and trust breeds trust. Let's take it even further. Respect is also found in how you speak about him to others. In a world where sarcasm and passive aggression have become normalized, a woman who honors her partner even when he's not in the room is a rare force. She becomes his home, his anchor, not because she's perfect, but because she chooses honor over ego. That's not just beautiful, that's powerful. Now let's dial in the urgency again. Every time you diminish someone, you train them to show up smaller. And over time, those small cuts add up. It's not dramatic, it's gradual. But one day you wake up next to someone who no longer tries, and the relationship you once dreamed of becomes routine. But the opposite is also true. Every word of respect becomes a seed, every moment of recognition becomes a mirror, and slowly a man begins to rise into the best version of himself, not for approval, but because he finally feels safe to be seen. Respect doesn't erase conflict, it transforms it. It creates a foundation where disagreement doesn't feel like rejection, where feedback doesn't sting like a slap, where both people can speak truth without fearing disconnection. And from that place, love becomes less about performance and more about partnership, the kind that doesn't burn out, the kind that builds legacy,